This is a brief video to give you some ideas to make your lessons more student-centered. So let's look at what the rubric says for student-centered learning. We have that activities, materials, and assessments are relevant to students, that students and the teacher create, adopt, and maintain classroom behavior standards. This would be in your learning environment. This would actually be a higher descriptor in managing student behavior, higher than proficient. Also, that you establish systems where students take initiative of their own learning and they self-monitor. Establish classroom practices, provide opportunities for students to communicate with their teachers and peers. So not only that you teach them how to communicate with you, but how do they communicate with other students? And that you also skillfully provoke and guide discussion to pique curiosity and inspire student-led learning of meaningful and challenging content. So this would be more of the guide on the side as opposed to the sage on the stage. One thing that you are always going to notice when you look at the copy of your rubric is when you're on the side that's the below expectations, that level 1 on your observation, and then you get over to the higher level, which is distinguished, which is the highest score you can get on a dimension. You notice that if all of your actions are teacher-centered and the students have no input and have no action involved, then you're going to end up on this lower end of the spectrum, that below expectations part. The more that you have students involved and leading the discussions, leading the activities, producing the work, the closer you get to that distinguished level. And this is in every domain, every dimension. So student-centered is the overall theme in every dimension. So you can't go wrong with having the kids doing most of the work. Let's look at some ideas and activities to add to your lessons to make them student-centered. Peer editing is a great one to use for your ELA classes. Anytime you're doing some type of open-ended response or you're doing an essay, this is a good way to get kids to provide feedback to each other. You can also do peer editing if it's for theater, for example. Let's say that students do a skit and you have the rest of the class give some peer reviews or critiques. That's a type of peer editing. Gallery walk is whenever you have things up on the wall around the room. It could be the material where the kids have to get the information from the material on the walls. This could also be where you have your posters that maybe groups create, and then you have an expert from the group that stays behind. And then the rest of the kids, when they're going around doing their gallery walk, this expert tells them about their topic. And this is another way that you can do a gallery walk to make it student-centered. Consensus placemat's one that I love to use with my kids because it gives them a chance to think individually, and then they have to collaborate and they have to think together. So I know this is not the best drawing in the world, but on my chart paper, I draw a better aligned circle and lines, and then I divide outside the circle by fourths or however many kids are in my group. On this part, this is where the kids think independently and they write their individual responses about a certain question that's pondered. So they write all 4 individually, and you want this big enough where if the kids are sitting on the outside, they can sit on the outside and write their responses. When you get to the middle, this is where the kids have to come up to a consensus. Using their answers that they had on the outside of their placemat, they have to come together and draw a conclusion from that and put that one consensus in the middle. So this is a really good way to do reviews. This is a really good way to provoke discussion. It also gives them a chance to see that most of them, sometimes whenever you have a question posed, they do have the same thoughts about it. Another one that's kind of been around and tale as old as time is flexible grouping. So that's, of course, having students work in groups. You can have multiple levels. You can have leveled grouping. This could also be where you have, if kids are working together and then you are at a particular small group doing some type of either enrichment or reteach. Stations where they have different activities at each station and then they rotate from station to station. That's another one where you can be student-centered. And then, of course, student discussion. So this is like your inner outer circle. This could also be Socratic seminar. There's lots of ways that you can set up student discussion where the kids are running the show, the kids are running the discussion, they're asking the questions, and you just kind of sit back and facilitate. Now let's say that you are used to doing whole class instruction. That is the way you've taught for 20 years. And you may have to ease into this whole idea of more student-centered components to your lesson. Sometimes we have days where it's the beginning of a unit and we have to do some whole class instruction to teach maybe the initial skill or concept. So some ways to kind of import some student-centered learning into a whole class lesson. I don't want to use the L word, but let's say you're doing a lecture. This could be a way to add in some components where the kids have to do some thinking and sharing. So think, pair, share. This is where you have them think independently about a question for about 1 minute. Then with a partner for about 2 minutes, they share their responses with each other. And then as a whole class for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, share out what maybe your partner's response was or what your response was. So this could be a 5 minute break in between a whole bit of whole class instruction for the kids to get a chance to digest the material. Jigsaw is one that's really great to use for acquiring content where the kids are having to do all the work and not you. So you have your initial group, and these are all experts, and they're group one. So they are learning all the material for group one. Well, then they're going to break out into other groups where you have somebody from maybe 4 or 5 other groups, and they're bringing their expertise to a new group of kids. So they're originally becoming experts on their content, and then they're going to go to a new group and they're going to share their expertise with others. One thing I did that really was effective with my students when they would have to share their material is I made them sit there, no pencils in their hands. If they couldn't stand it, they had to maybe sit on their hands while they listened to the other person explain or share their material, so that they had to actively listen to them. And then they could pick up their pencil and summarize what the person said. So this teaches active listening. It also teaches summarization skills. 3 minute review. This is it's pretty self-explanatory. So the kids, let's say they're sitting in a group, they get that 3 minutes, maybe after 20 minutes into whole class instruction, you give them a 3 minutes to kind of summarize where they're at so far. A good end of class check for mastery one is called quiz, quiz, trade. So the kids maybe have a note card and they write their own questions on the note card. They go and find a person. Excuse my drawing. They go and find a person. They ask their question. The other person answers it. And then they switch cards. Now you have a new question. And you go and find a new partner. And then you ask that question. After you ask each other your questions, you trade cards. You go and find a new partner. So you're quizzing them on your questions, trading your cards, and then going and asking a new question. This is a really good one to get kids out of their seat and moving around and getting them writing their own questions. There's so many components of quiz, quiz, trade that make it student-centered, that adds questioning and higher level thinking into the lesson. So some final tips for making your lesson more student-centered. Just remember, the more student-led, the more your kids are doing in your lesson, the better. Another part that's just kind of a background for student-centered learning, have them ask the questions and have them provide the feedback. Now, sometimes you may have to give them some stems, some question starters, some stems for how to give constructive criticism and feedback. That's okay. Teach them those skills so that they can continue to use them in future lessons. And as you see down here, the link to grouping strategies handout, I have a whole 2-page with maybe 15 to 20 different grouping strategies and the link is in the comment section of the video. I know this seems like a really simple topic, but it's so powerful to have the kids in charge of their own learning, and I hope this helps you to make that happen a little more in your classroom.